I've been thinking a lot about the Idaho case the last few days. Over the weekend, I had a lot of power outages, so I had a lot of time to ponder. It's become a very interesting case. It's a nightmare, a complete nightmare, a horror movie. And I was saying in the first video I did on it, I thought initially they knew. Police in the first few days told the public not to worry. It's isolated, it's targeted, and that kind of gave a hint that they knew who it was. That seems like a mistake. It was a mistake because they backtracked on it a few days later. But since that mistake, I think the police department in Moscow have done a fantastic job. They didn't have a murder in a long time, and bar that mistake, I think they've handled it very well. It's the same with most people online and people following and covering this case. They've all been very level-headed also. I worried that it might turn into an even bigger nightmare than it already is for the victims' families, the victims' friends, anyone connected to this case. Like once social media got a hold of it. And there was a few signs of that happening early on, but I think the Moscow police and whoever is advising them is doing a great job. The support network from the university I think is probably awesome also. This has shaken the whole university, the town, to its core, and it seems like there's a lot of really good people there. I feel bad for them, and you can see this in the latest update from the Moscow police. They're talking about the amount of requests to check on welfare of loved ones and the amount of calls for people who think there's unusual circumstances in their homes. The whole town is spooked by this. And Moscow police are just coming out saying, yeah, calls are up, but call us before you call any family members. Because in a lot of these cases, people are calling their friends and their family first. Moscow police are now saying, don't take any chances. Something dodgy going on, call us, we'll be out. They've had a lot of press releases, they've had a lot of communication with the community. They're very good at updating the community and updating everybody with information that they have. They have protected a lot of innocent people by saying, here look, this is a list of people who are not suspects at this time. And I think that has really helped, and maybe other departments and other police departments can learn a lot from Moscow police and how they navigated social media with such a big case. Like some of the nasty social media stuff might still be going on in this case, but I haven't seen it, although I haven't gone looking for it either. The content creators, the YouTubers that I have watched who are covering this case are all doing a great job. Yeah, they're speculating, but they're very fast to update their viewers, their audience, with the information from the police department, and they're very responsible in how they cover it. Really good content, PowerPoints, 3D models, footage of the back of the house. Like, I don't know about you guys, but to be honest, the channels that I watch, I'll link some of them down below, have all done a great job in covering this case and giving us some really good insight and info. So where do we stand? Moscow police have said they have they're not suspects at this time. They kind of changed the wording of that a small bit, but they have confirmed these people are not suspects at this time. The two surviving roommates, other people in the house when 911 was called, the person who drove Kaylee and Madison home, the guy seen in the surveillance video from the food truck, and Kaylee's ex-boyfriend Jack, who a lot of people were suspicious of, and Kaylee and Madison were making calls to him shortly before they were killed. But Moscow police, very quick to come out, I like it, and said no, none of these people are suspects at this time, which is good that they can come out and say that, but also kind of worrying. Like, who is it? If it's close, if it's targeted, you would have to imagine that the police have already talked to the person who did it. You'd hope so anyway. And it feels like we are kind of nudging away from that. I still think forensics will be massive in this case. A lot of it has not come back yet. I don't think any of it has. But when it does, it could change everything very, very fast. There's going to be a ton. We know there's a lot of forensic evidence there. I have a list of 6 categories of people who I think could have done this. This is just my list from my own notes. I list them out here, but just one thing before I do. One thing I just want to hone in on a small bit. Ethan's body was released first. Not all the victims were killed in their bed. If one wasn't, which looks like that could be the case because the coroner is very yappy in this case, maybe a bit too yappy, but it looks like one of the victims was not killed in their bed, was not killed while they were asleep. and I believe that person could be Ethan. Why would his body be released first? Just logically. Ethan's funeral was over and all before any of the girls of the other victims, before their bodies were released. Why is that the case? I think it's the case because they need more time to process and to do some testing with the autopsies with the other victims. Why do you think that is? Just speculation from me, but I think that is because Ethan was killed first. The roommates said they could see one person and they thought they might be unconscious, so no obvious signs that blood was coming from the body or anything like that. And we don't know who that person was, but I just speculate that could have been Ethan. If it was, it must have been a very clinical stabbing. But folks, something like one shot to the lungs could do that. That would take huge strength and rage. It's not as easy as you might think. And another thing is, all 4 victims were stabbed, so you will have transfer of blood from victim to victim. Victims 2, 3 and 4 will have some transfer from the victims that were stabbed just before that. So it could be possible from examining the bodies that you could determine who was stabbed first, second, third, fourth, especially if the killer didn't go back to one of the victims after he stabbed them initially. But if that's the case, if they were all killed one after each other, they would have some sort of transfer, except for the first person who was stabbed. Is that another indication that this was Ethan? Was he killed first? If he was stabbed first with a clean shot, I can see why his body would be released a good bit of time before the others, like it was. Basically, there's less evidence to process. I think that makes sense. But does that tell us anything? Can you make an argument that in fact, maybe it's Ethan who was the target? He was killed first. They went straight for him. If Ethan was the target, why would the killer go upstairs to the other 2 girls? That part doesn't make sense. If Ethan was killed first, is that a sign that the killer came in via the keypad? He knew the code? Like, otherwise, you're kind of going out of your way to get there. Coming in the sliding doorway, you can make your way straight to the girls without coming across Ethan, unless he went out there to confront them or something like that. It's puzzling. And it looks like the killer had a problem with all 4 of the victims. Maybe, I'm not sure, but maybe one more than the other 3. But their issues were with all 4, and the thing that's in common with all 4 could be that they were all students. Did he have a problem with one person, but a problem with all 3 because they felt like the other 3 had influenced this one person? I don't know. So the 6 kind of categories that I have just from my notes, and some people you'll see could fit into maybe 2 of these. But starting with one that I just said, a person who had an issue with one person in that house, but disliked all of them, disliked the other 3 as well. That's why they were all targeted, but one more so than the others. The next one I'm just going to throw in there, as a group itself, people who are already ruled out, I think there's a chance that forensics might bring them back to one of these people. Number 3, a person on the fringe of their social circle. So would know the keypad to the house, has been there, knows them a little bit, but not like a best friend or anything. A college dropout perhaps. Number 4 is a neighbour. I know it's probably just standard practice, but I found it intriguing when they were back at the house recently. They were looking at the window and looking at the neighbours to see who kind of had eyesight, who could have been watching the girls or watching the house. Was there a little peeping Tom around the place? It's a big escalation, but it can happen. Number 5 is a group target with some level of stalking. So that can kind of merge into 4 as well, but not necessarily a neighbour, but someone who knew the group before they got home that night. So not someone who just randomly stumbled across the house. Someone who knew exactly was in that house, someone who knew the 4 victims, some knowledge of them, and wanted them dead. And number 6 is a group target with no real stalking, but it could be maybe watch them for an hour or 2 before they got home. And we seen with that house, it's very easy to get around the back of that house and just kind of sit there in the woods and have a good old gawk. This one for me is probably the most frightening, because with this scenario, it's someone who didn't necessarily have an issue with the 4 people in the house personally, but it might be just the fact that they were young, the fact that they were students, and in this scenario as well, it's likely that this person will strike again. I don't think this is the case. I hope this isn't the case. Like, as far as we know, the police have told some of the families that they believe this was targeted, and one individual was targeted more than the others. So going back to kind of what I was saying as well about Ethan, like, if he was taken out first and the way the house is set up, I think there's a chance he might have come in through the keypad way. That's someone who clearly knows the house. He's been there before, he knows the code. So is that why they're so kind of honed in on this being targeted? We also know that there's some evidence that we don't know, which is an indication to the police that this is some level of target. Somebody was targeted. Whether it was one person or all four, we don't know. It's a mad one. I hope they have some sort of a push on all that forensics. You have to imagine they do, that stuff is going to be done as fast as possible. But I think that's going to be key in this case once they get some of that forensic evidence back, because this is manic. You can't carry out a crime like this and not leave a mountain of evidence behind. I hope it comes back soon. I hope they catch him soon. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's someone that they've talked to already that's under their nose a small bit. Let me know what you think. Very interested in your thoughts in this one, because it's a mad one. Good luck. God bless. I hope everyone has a nice day.